And now to the day's other news, and there was some. The Trump administration unveiled its plan to reverse President Obama's coal pollution rules. The Environmental Protection Agency's new proposal would weaken restrictions on carbon emissions from coal-fired power plants and give states more control over regulations. We'll have more on the impact of the EPA rollback right after the rest of today's headlines. Microsoft said that it had foiled the latest attempt by Russian hackers to infiltrate U.S. politics ahead of November's midterm elections. The tech giant announced today that it had removed fake versions of the websites of the U.S. Senate and two conservative think tanks, a so-called spear phishing campaign it said was mounted by the same Russian group responsible for meddling in the 2016 election. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov denied that Russia was behind the attack.
We do not know what hackers they are talking about. We do not know what is meant by influence on elections. We hear confirmations from America that there was no influence on elections. Who exactly are they talking about?
Microsoft's president said there were no signs the hackers were successful in obtaining users' credentials. President Trump's Supreme Court nominee tried to win over senators on Capitol Hill today, including a key Republican vote. Lisa Desjardins reports on Brett Kavanaugh's path to confirmation.
Echoing on Capitol Hill today, photo clicks and footsteps as Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh had his busiest day yet, meeting with 6 senators, including 5 Democrats. One meeting overshadowed them all.
Thank you for having me.
The vote of Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins could be decisive. With 50 Republicans regularly voting in the chamber now, the party may need them all to get Kavanaugh confirmed. Collins emerged still undecided more than 2 hours later, Judge Kavanaugh's longest meeting.
We talked about executive power. We talked about the Heller gun decision. We talked about his judicial philosophy.
And they talked about abortion, something driving both protests against and praise of Kavanaugh. He's seen as conservative on the issue. Collins supports Roe versus Wade and said Kavanaugh laid out his view.
We talked about whether he considered Roe to be settled law. He said that he agreed with what Justice Roberts said at his nomination hearing, in which he said that it was settled law.
These were Roberts' exact words as a nominee in 2005 about Roe.
It is settled as a precedent of the court, yes.
Democratic leader Chuck Schumer today said that answer reveals nothing.
Everything the Supreme Court decides is settled law until it unsettles it. Saying a case is settled law is not the same thing as saying a case was correctly decided.
Meantime, Schumer and Democrats also are focusing on Kavanaugh's time working in the Bush White House. They want access to hundreds of thousands of pages of his documents. But Republicans insist that's political, pointing to the over 100,000 pages already public, and they say more are coming.
The reason why we're talking about the great paper chase is because I think our Democratic colleagues have found out all of their other attempts to undermine or to criticize this nominee have fallen flat.
Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings begin in exactly 2 weeks. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Lisa Desjardins at the U.S. Capitol.
The United States has deported the last known Nazi suspect in the country to Germany after he lived in the U.S. for almost 70 years. The government believes that Yakiv Palij served as a guard at a concentration camp in Poland during World War II, which he concealed in order to enter the U.S. in 1949. Federal agents carried the 95-year-old from his home in Queens, New York this morning in a wheelchair. The head of Nazi investigations in Germany said no arrest warrant had been issued for him there.
We have to wait to see whether there will be a new evaluation or whether new evidence appears to underpin the suspicion. With all Nazi crimes, we have tremendous difficulties to solve them. Because they date back so long, the situation on site has changed.
A judge had ordered Palij to be deported 14 years ago, but until now, Germany and other European countries had refused to take him. Hundreds of protesters converged at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill last night to topple a Confederate statue known as Silent Sam. It had stood on campus since 1913 as a monument to Confederate soldiers. Campus police say they have charged one man in connection with the incident. UNC's chancellor acknowledged that the statue was, quote, divisive, but condemned the protest as dangerous. There is word today that the president's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, recently hosted a publisher of white nationalist content in his home. Peter Brimelow is an anti-immigration activist whose website is a platform for white identity politics. The Washington Post reported that Brimelow was a guest at Kudlow's birthday party last weekend. Kudlow said that if he had known of Brimelow's views, quote, we would never have invited him. A Republican congressman and his wife have been indicted by a federal grand jury for misusing campaign funds. California's Duncan Hunter is accused of improperly spending $250,000 on expenses like dental work and international travel and filing false campaign finance reports. The Department of Justice investigation has lasted over a year, in which the congressman maintained his innocence. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 63 points to close at 25,822. The Nasdaq rose 38 to close at 78.59, and the S&P 500 gained 6 to close at 28.63.